So to set the context of this topic, very convoluted way of saying talent management and putting the onus on CFOs, right? As if their plate was empty, as if they're free. First, you wanted them to run the balance sheet, take accountability for governance, then also M&A, also change management, also culture management, taking care of external stakeholders. I mean, whatever R's are, IR, PR, ER, whatever, ER for emergency room for what they do. Uh, and I think suddenly we come to the topic of where do you get talent from? And how do they manage that talent? And here I want to bring the complication. I think, except for him probably, we kind of tilt the average age in the room. And that's also very representative of the Indian corporate CFO community. But if you look at the rise of startups, rise of listed startups, the average age of CFOs is dropping. But very classically, if you look at the last 8 listings that happened, the CFO is at least 45 years plus of age, which means you're going back saying that I need a certain amount of maturity of understanding, experience for a good CFO to do what it takes. It's not just, everything is just not about the youth. So how do you balance the agility of or exuberance of youth? And 2, how do you bring that seriousness and maturity of what you expect in a CFO candidate? And of course, how do you identify the essential skills of what I call the GEMS community? I think we live in a GEMS world. GEMS, I write it as GEMZ. Gig economy, millennials, and Generation Z. That's the world we live in. And about 80% of Indian community will fall into the GEMS community. How do we actually build organizations that can serve them and that can also have them on board? So really challenging one, and what I'm going to ask my panel to do is this supposedly easy task of balancing innovation, fostering talent, building pipeline, strategies for upskilling and reskilling. What was originally a function of HR and learning and development suddenly is now thrust on the finance professionals to say, you know this business, you know the complexity, and why don't you train the next set of leaders for it? So it comes with its own challenge, time pressure, because their stakeholders are only increasing today. So I will open up the panel with each of them sharing their observations, and we'll come around for a quick set of question answers as well. So where do we start? Let's start with you.
Good afternoon, very nice to be here. I think Srinath summarized it exceedingly well in terms of what is expected of a job of a CFO. I personally feel, and I've been in this field for 30 years now, I think this is the best moment for a CFO and the most challenging moment for a CFO. I think best because the kind of learning that each of us go through and our teams go through is just phenomenal. Every day is a new day, you learn something, and that has not been the case, at least when I started my career, right? So it was definitely not the case. The most challenging because of all the expectations that you mentioned, right? So a lot of expectations out there. Now, we are a group of $3 billion. We have 10 different businesses, and we have CFOs and boards across all these businesses as well. The one thing I simplify to all my team members is, all to the boards as well, to say that you are paid and hired only to do primarily 2 things, right? One, to grow the business. Second is to build resilience. Everybody understands growth, right? That is the easier part. Everybody wants to grow, create value. That part of it is clear. When it comes to resilience, I think that becomes a really difficult. The next question that comes up is, now what do you mean by resilience? What skills do I have to build to bring resilience to my business? So given the uncertainties that we have in the world today, I think resilience is absolutely, everybody will agree, is an important element in the growth. I have been personally part of businesses which have grown phenomenally, and after 5 years you turn around and you see so many holes, you write off stuff, you do all of those things, right? So building those things in a good way with good foundation is important. I personally see 3-4 essential skills that CFOs need to have. One, of course, I have to talk to the title of the conference, Future of CFO. Clearly, with technology coming in, I personally feel the art of the possible has to be understood by the CFO. art of the possible in terms of how do you use technology, how do you aspire, how do you set your aspirations for you and the rest of the business. I think it's very important to understand what technology can do to you as a business, right? And I'm not just meaning processes, as a business, maybe as new business models or maybe something else as well. So that's very important, and I should admit, in most cases, people pretend to know. I think it is not cool to say I don't understand technology. So a lot of people say I deal with technology, but when you really scratch the surface, you really have to go deep to understand what do you mean by that, right? My really plea would be for all of us, I would say, is to really understand technology at a depth which is very relevant for our jobs, right? That's important. That's the first one. The second one, which is not new to our times, is business sensing. I see that with technology, remote work, all of that, people are in multiple remote places. Ultimately, business happens in two places, either in the factory or in your market, right? If people are not spending enough time on these two places, I think building that skill and sensing what is happening with a customer or at the manufacturing place or wherever, whatever businesses you have, I think that's the second skill that's absolutely needed. Third is managing risks. When I mean risk, everybody understands operational risk. I have a tough time within my own businesses to say, let's focus on strategic risks. Now, when you say strategic risk, I mean, for example, maybe I have a supplier where 80% I'm dependent on, say, sourcing from one country, or it's a customer concentration risk. It could be any of those risks, but truly strategic risks, understanding that. And the last one, and I will stop with that, is clearly the art of impactful communication. I think it has nothing to do with the function, but the individual. I see that becoming lower and lower over the years. How do you use data? How do you use visualization? Ultimately, the job is to influence people, right? The art of impactful communication is a skill that needs to be honed almost on a daily basis. That is something that we really look for. Of course, we are on the journey. We never arrived. We are on the journey, but at least that would be my first summary, I would say.
So, Jyoti, before we go on to you, I mean, what you mentioned very importantly, risk and resilience. What was originally the core function for a CFO, but today you also added the other complication, data and digital. I mean, how do you cope up with skilling oneself and constantly skilling, because you're unlearning faster than you're actually learning, and yet you're expected to deliver on the go all the time?
Thank you, Business World, and thank you all the panelists and Sir Srinath for inviting me here. I basically run a financial advisory firm. So we are a bunch of finance people, around 350 people. So I think so that's what the problem area comes down to me. So whenever I'm hiring any people and whenever I'm thinking that what is the issue, so there are two types of problem statement or two types of things that we need to resolve. One is whenever you are looking at a people, what type of skill set are you looking at? What he knows or whom he knows? So we can't understand this too कि आप उसको किसके लिए hire कर रहे हैं. So what he knows, that skill set needs to be reskilled every 3 years. Whom he knows, that's where your transitions comes from. So that differentiation, that what he knows, because I come from a consulting industry. So consulting industry, each and every interpretation in income tax, each and every interpretation in SEBI laws or anything in the financial world, after some period of time, every law has got two hands. On the one hand is this, on the other hand is this. So now it boils down कि सर आप एक काम करा सकते हैं कि हमको लेफ्ट हैंड साइड वाला तो हाथ नहीं चाहिए, हमको राइट हैंड वाला हाथ चाहिए. So now, तो what you understand, that becomes there. वहाँ तक क्लोज हो गया, एंड देयर आफ्टर नाउ व्हाट यू अंडरस्टैंड अगेंस्ट गेट्स कीप ऑन चेंजिंग. तो व्हाट आई हैव सीन, लाइक वी वर हायरिंग वन कंप्लायंस ऑफिसर. तो इन द कंप्लायंस ऑफिसर वी वर थिंकिंग कि क्या हायर करना है, तो HR लेके आया कि सब वी शुड हायर सम एक्सपीरियंस पीपल. तो एटलीस्ट 15 ईयर ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस व्हेन दिस JD वाज मेड. मैं बोला सर GST आया ही 3 साल हुआ है. IBBI, the insolvency has come 3 years before. Every new act, whatever that you see, there is so much of transition happened. I passed out my CCA. I don't even remember those excise and custom duty act whenever that it was passed on at that point of time. So please try and understand to what you know that keeps on getting changes, and the upgradation only comes from whom you know. So this is, I think, so this is where the, how you skill yourself, what you know and whom you know, that differentiation needs to be understood properly, sir.
Thank you. That was interesting. What you know and whom you know. Is there also a way that we will classify a professional company versus promoter company?
Sir, again, the promoter, whoever is there, he is only looking at all these CXOs, ki sir, whom he knows. I have never understood any promoter that he exactly come and tell you कि सर मेरे को इनकम टैक्स का रिफंड ला दीजिए. उसको कोई मतलब नहीं है कि आप कौन सा एक्ट का इंटरप्रिटेशन करके, how do you interpret that act and how do you get that refund done. He only understand whether that income tax refund has come or not. He will only understand whether the company valuation has achieved 5,000 crore or not. So he is only concentrated only on one line objective that he gives to you. So that's whether it is a promoter driven company or whoever are the CXOs, they are only concerned with that. What do you understand and how do you achieve that one liner? That's whom do you know and what do you know. Again, that difference comes.
Thank you. So Rajeev, I'm going to come to you. One of the challenge today and what we aim to cover is the concept of diversity and inclusion. And your entity has both of these and you work with global clients as well. While we are on the topic of diversity and inclusion, I must make an apology on behalf of all of us because we actually break the diversity code, right? I mean, there's no diversity. We are a manel. We are doing man speaking here. So I think that's also the challenge and nature of these panels. Today, if you are a global entity, the lens with which you are watched, not for your output, not for your services, but also for your workforce, the way you have governance structures, also forces you to kind of employ or change your employment strategy very, very differently.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here talking to all of you. Good evening to all of you folks here. So to me, diversity and inclusion, right? And before I answer to the question, I'll step back, right? I agree to a lot of points that Madhavan talked about, right? Which is the CFO's role has gone through a plethora of change in the last maybe 5 years or even beyond that, right? To think of, I'll just take 2 examples. ESG, right? I mean, about 5 years ago, as CFOs, probably we were grappling with what is governance. And suddenly you have environment and social. Of course, we had CSR, and a lot of us used to have, the spend of 2% on different projects. And suddenly you are into impact analysis and so on and so forth, right? I will not get into the technical terms, but you're having to completely decipher ESG. And within that ESG is diversity and inclusion as well, right? Some of you may know. Now, to understand what is going on and suddenly know that a business person comes to you and say, hey Rajeev, I've got a supplier or a customer who doesn't want to work with us because you're not listed on so-and-so platform. I don't know how many of you know EcoVadis. And trust me, when that business person is having a conversation with me, I'm grappling with the fact saying, okay, what is EcoVadis? And suddenly I have to have my ESG head go and research on EcoVadis, and I do an entire program, right? By the way, just to let you know, we won a Golden Peacock Award on ESG just about last month, right? So to tell you the fact that as a CFO, you're sponsoring ESG in the organization, and you may have learned that over the last 2 years. Within ESG is diversity and inclusion. We work with a lot of customers in US, right? Being an engineering services company and of course listed in India, and also having L&T as a parentage, we are supposed to be high on governance and a lot of these things. Expectation is minimal, I can tell you that much. That's sarcastic, okay? The fact that when you're working with a US customer, the US customer has a template. That template says how many, let's say, physically challenged people do you employ? And sorry to use some of these terms because these are templates, right? How many differently abled people is exactly how they use. What is your diversity ratio? What is your inclusivity ratio? Ethnicity ratio? And suddenly you're thinking differently, saying, okay, you need to do these as well. So the contours of doing business have changed dramatically. A customer can come back saying, sorry, you're not following all this, I'm not going to shortlist you. So to your point, it is not just about thinking the basics of what it was in terms of accounting or tax or regulation. It's suddenly having you to think at a global platform when you're competing with someone. How do you make yourself at the top notch in that competition so that you're not knocked off? And there may be the final most reasons which are actually your business competence, right? And all the other becomes purely an enabler, right? So to your point on diversity and inclusion it is not just an HR issue. It's a business issue, it's a finance issue, it is an entire board issue, right? And that's where it gets discussed. The board will often ask us, so how many women employees do you have, right? And how many differently abled employees do you have? And you're having to make a presentation telling the board, here are your aspirations, here is how you're moving, this is how you're employing differently abled people, so on and so forth. So to me, I think this is going to be truly something that the boards will have to continue to adopt. Now the fact is that until the board or the top-down management doesn't adopt this, you're not going to see the middle or the bottom layer of the management at all act upon it. So then again becomes the onus on the CFO, because a lot may have been promised at the board level. Finally, when the minutes get made, the action is on the name of the CFO, right? So that's where it is, and probably that's when I'm going to stop. Yeah.
So the name of the CFO, Deepak, I want to bring you in here and ask you this question. The expectation in the digital world is as if almost computers and AI will do everything, and the CFOs will have it very easy by just clicking a couple of buttons and saying, I own it. And how is it putting pressure on team building exercises? Because you can't really build teams by gathering hundreds of years of man-years of experience overnight. It takes time. It takes time to train them and to get them up to speed. And yet there is a sense of, I think, urgency in the industry. One of the toughest searches I see, apart from chief digital officer, is the chief financial officers. Very difficult to train, recruit people for CFOs. And that's because there is not just a lot of choice, but I think even if there's a sense of doubt, people just don't want to take it up. They feel that I'm better off because there's also a lot of legal responsibilities that a CFO today has. So what are the challenges that you encounter in these days?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Srinath, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the easy question. I think there are 2 or 3 parts to the question. First is the skill sets that are needed, and some of the panelists kind of touched upon that. There are, even when the world is changing, I realize that the skill sets that finance fraternity need to have can be classified in 3 broad buckets. The first is the basic skills, the foundation. And that is not changing in my view, right? It is about knowing the business code. It is about influencing stakeholders. It is about the technical skills of accounting, the risk management, auditing, right? All of those still continue to be the foundation of being a good finance professional. You need to understand numbers, you need to know data, and you need to have the ability of transforming data into information, into insights, into actionable foresights. And that's what finance professionals are respected for. Those skill sets continue to be very, very relevant. And then you top that up with the second and third bucket. Second bucket is what Madhavan also kind of Rajeev also spoke about. My mistake, apologies. But Rajeev also spoke about which are the skill sets in this today's global world, right? Which is ESG. Sustainability was really not an expectation earlier, and now it is, right? We need to understand, not only understand sustainability, we need to drive the organization on that path today, right? We need to understand as the startups are going up and the world is changing, the global outlook, the treasury function, funding, valuations, all of that is important. And then the third part is digital. And digital is, I think, the space is evolving. AI, machine learning, blockchain, all of these are new technologies. And we need to understand it all if we want to be at the forefront of change. But it is so fluid that we don't know where to start, what skills really to kind of build. In my view, what is most important, that's what we try to do at EPL and even in my earlier organizations, is be open to the fact that we need to change. We need to reskill ourselves. We need to upskill a lot, right? And for that, once you have that mindset going that we really need to learn each of these things, then you start listening to the outside in view, talking to the experts, getting actually experts in the team meeting, and having them talk about what is happening in the world. Going and really talking to the experts who know, because see, these skill sets are not there, not available internally. Unlike finance skill sets that you can go to your mentors and seniors or juniors, these skill sets are not available inside. So you have to have a very, very high quotient of outside in view. Once you have that, I think all of these technologies are evolving. If you are open, if we are open to learning and to building those things into our daily routine, I think we will evolve. That's what I think.
So can we take comfort that CFOs are biologically born and not digitally downloaded?
I think the world is like that. I think each one of us, CFOs obviously have the added responsibility of making sure that the organizations are financially ahead, the security, the governance, internal controls, all of those are kind of well in place, and technology plays a very, very huge role in that. But I think as a world, we are at a place where all of us are learning. And that's what I understand as I keep talking to different people, a lot of startups, and some people are doing phenomenal, incredible stuff these days to kind of automate processes, to make sure that the payment and the fintech space is so much more agile and seamless and smooth. So, but everyone is learning, and I think we will get through this phase as well.
Sure. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to go around the panel once with a quick rapid fire. And Madhavan, coming to you, what is the toughest amongst a wide gamut of each of your roles? What is the toughest role as a CFO today?
I mean,
A quick
toughest,
30-second
I would
round.
say, managing ambition versus capability.
Ambition versus capability. Do you see that in younger one or the
No, I
mid-level
see that everywhere. I think, including us, all of us want to be ambitious, want to be at a particular place. My entire team, group of CFOs have great ambitions. My kids have a lot of ambition, but we have to constantly help them with building that capability as well. That's why you start seeing stress, mental health, all of those things that happen, because that constant nourishment doesn't happen. And I'll just take 30 seconds. We have about 500, 600 finance professionals across the globe. And we have been experimenting last 1 year with a course where we don't teach any finance skill set. It's a 6 months program where they go deep into themselves to really find out what they want as an individual. You will not believe the kind of impact it has had on people. It helps them significantly to choose what they want to do, right? And some of them have said, I don't want to be in finance, I think I'm the wrong job, which is fine, right? As well, you find your calling. I sincerely feel managing ambition, which we should not reduce. I think the opportunity is out there, but help build people capabilities to meet their ambition, I think is the toughest, at least from my point of view.
In my organization, I personally see there is one peculiar problem. Data is with the down the level people. We have interacted with the client, we have interacted with the regulator. The data is with the down the level people. Decision making is with the top level people. So how that data, or that, like I've interacted with one regulator or with one person, my middle level manager or my lower level manager has interacted, he will only give so much of a download to his bosses कि सर मैं गया था उसने ये बात बोला, but sir there will be communication of half an hour time, what are the things that has been discussed, there are so many other finer points that in case if that has been discussed with the top level people, his decision could have been changed. But how that proper, वो एक line communication, what is that one line effective communication or 5 line that he needs that lower level people should go and tell to the higher level people. How that understanding of that lower level people can come and what questions should that higher level people should ask so that the proper communication is being done. This is the problem which I face and day in and day out, sir.
So in the HR parlance, we call it typically for promotions, or depending on the level and hierarchy, where do you want to pick them, you run something called assessment centers. And the idea is very simple. In the what we call the data filter, the data inverted pyramid, you put a lot of data on top. When you filter it, you get information. But you distill it further, you actually get knowledge. And you distill it further, you get wisdom. And what you're saying is, you have an analyst with data, but you have the managing director expected to have wisdom. So which is why when you do the assessment center of who do you promote, it's not about age qualification. It's about ability to pick the data into information, into knowledge. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have in the knowledge world today. The conventional hierarchy was failed because nobody cares. I mean, I don't want to be promoted every 3 years. Today, everybody wants to be promoted every year, so you rise to the level of incompetence very quickly. So we'll have to change that game. And I think it boils down to the ambition versus capability set. So one tough problem, 30 seconds. We are already there waving hands.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think the discussion that we are having in this panel is actually a very, very difficult thing to manage. How to manage talent in today's world where the generational gap is probably highest ever, right? And while delivering to the very differently evolving need of the organizations in this evolving world. For our success, for everyone's success, the team is the most important, right? So whether it's the first-time manager, manager of managers, or leaders, the team is the most important, and that divide as the new generation is coming in is kind of increasing. So learning what the expectations are, being flexible, and kind of managing a winning team, I think is a fairly interesting challenge to have.
Thank you. I mean, I think there are lots of learnings from the Indian cricket team for this. I mean, you have diversity, you have languages, you have social hierarchies, wealth hierarchies, and yet they're able to do something phenomenal because the common passion for that sport, I think, binds it. I think that's a learning for a lot of corporates as well. Rajeev, the last word.
So it's an interesting one, right? What is the most challenging thing that you face, in your role as a CFO? To me, it is really managing expectations, because you are basically addressing so many stakeholders at any given point in time, right? It's your board, it's your investors, it's your employees, it's your vendors, it's your customers. You can just go on, right? And now with ESG, you're also talking about environmental consequences. There are a lot of these expectations, and trust me, you're no superhuman to solve everyone's problem. So first, we got to be honest. We don't know all the answers, right? And many times we don't agree upon this, and we succumb to pressures. You got to be honest, and you got to have the courage in your back to say no to what you can't do or what you don't know, right? The second truly is that in managing all of these expectations, you need to build grounds up strong values and cultures within the organization. If the bottom layer of your team is not comfortable or confident that the decisions that you make are in the best interest, they will also start to follow you, right? So it has to be bottom up in terms of building the values and the culture, because at the end of the day, when you go up, you will see that all the expectations will only get met if you have the right culture and the values, right? Last but not the least, you may fail, and you have to be honest, right? When you fail, you will have to turn back and say so, that look, I could not meet so-and-so expectation. I'll give an example. Often everyone, let's say an investor is expecting some growth, and you go and make certain guidance and promises around what you expect the year to be. Fact is, like the geopolitical situation you're facing, you don't know what's going to happen in the year, right? You come back and you have to cut a guidance. The investor is having an honest chat saying, basis what you mentioned, I invested in the company. Correct. Tell me, what do I do? How do I go back to my own investors, right, who believed in me? Fact is, you're having to stitch all of this together and still come back with something that's a resilient story. And I think that's a fabulous job that we as CFOs do. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a quick wrap. Risk, resilience, and reward. I mean, the blend of these makes a CEO's life interesting, complicated, and exciting from outside. Thank you for being wonderful panelists. Thank you.